As we make our way through the life of Abraham, we'll find many passages that offer positive and negative examples. But in the third place, there were times when Moses connected the life of Abraham to the lives of his readers by showing how events in the patriarch's life foreshadowed or adumbrated events that took place in his day. In many respects, the connection of historical backgrounds requires very little similarity between the story and its audience to accomplish its purpose. Examples or models require more similarity between the story and its audience for the example to be relevant. But foreshadowing occurs only when there are many similarities, so much so that that world of Abraham looks almost exactly like their world of Israel. Now, this kind of extensive connection occurs infrequently in the stories of Abraham's life, but from time to time, Moses described the days of Abraham in ways that closely resembled events in his own day. Many of us have heard the old adage, history often repeats itself. Of course, we all know that no two sets of historical events are ever exactly the same. But sometimes events are so similar that the second seems to be almost a repetition of the first. When biblical writers saw that events in the past seemed to be repeated in the lives of their audiences, they often made this connection clear. And this literary technique is known as foreshadowing. One example of foreshadowing appears in the well-known episode that describes Abraham's covenant with God in Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 21. God gave Abraham assurance that his descendants would one day possess the land of Canaan by calling him to prepare for a covenant ritual. Abraham prepared by cutting some animals in half and by placing the pieces of their torn flesh on either side of a path. After the patriarch had fallen asleep, he had a vision of something that closely resembled an experience the original audience had in their day. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 17, we read these words, "When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces." In the larger context of this passage, we learn that this smoking pot and blazing torch represented God Himself passing among the torn flesh of animals as an assurance that He would surely give Abraham's descendants the land of promise. Now get the picture. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 17, God passed before Abraham as smoke and fire to assure him that God would give his descendants the land of promise. Now, to us as modern readers, it may seem strange for God to assure Abraham by appearing as smoke and fire. But when we remember that Moses wrote about Abraham's life for the Israelites following him toward the Promised Land, it's not surprising at all that he would include this detail. Throughout the Israelites' travels, God had appeared before Israel in a way that resembled the smoking pot and flaming torch. In the glory cloud that led them toward the Promised Land, God appeared to them too as smoke and fire. So in this way, God's appearance to Abraham foreshadowed the way He appeared to the Israelites in Moses' day. And as Abraham gained assurance of possessing the land because God went before him in this manner, the Israelites hearing this story should have gained assurance of possessing the land in their day as well. Another, even more extensive foreshadowing occurs in the episode of Abraham's deliverance from Egypt, found in Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20. This passage was written to guide Israel in their outlooks on Egypt. In this case, Moses constructed the entire episode so that it closely paralleled the experience of Israelites under his leadership. In Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20, Abraham began a sojourn in Egypt because of a famine in the land of Canaan. He was delayed in Egypt when Pharaoh took Sarah into his harem. but God delivered Abraham by sending diseases on Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh then sent Abraham away from Egypt, and Abraham left Egypt with great wealth. This story about Abraham was clearly designed to foreshadow the experience of the nation of Israel generations later. Just like Abraham, they sojourned to Egypt because of a famine in the land of Canaan. They were held there by Pharaoh. They were delivered by disease sent from God to the house of Pharaoh. Pharaoh ordered Israel's release, and Israel left Egypt having plundered the riches of the Egyptians. Moses purposefully shaped this account so that it foreshadowed the experiences of his audience. This kind of extensive foreshadowing is rare in the stories of Abraham, but such connections appear here and there in Abraham's stories.